Some stories don't shout. They whisper, quietly, achingly, pulling you closer with every broken light, every battered sidewalk, every small act of kindness no one ever sees. In the heart of a forgotten city, one girl moved like a silent force, her worn shoes carrying not just scraps of food, but hope itself. Tonight, you're about to witness how a single, unseen act can ripple through lives like a miracle waiting to be found. If you believe kindness matters, tap that like button, hit subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Now, step into the rain with us, where a girl with nothing left to give still chooses to give everything. The rain came down in sharp, slanted sheets, turning the cracked sidewalks of Briarwood into mirrors of broken neon light. From the weary doorway of the rusty lantern, Naomi Brooks stepped into the night, the battered soles of her sneakers splashing into shallow puddles. She clutched a worn canvas bag to her chest, its weight light but its purpose heavy. The last echoes of a long shift clung to her, grease-smudged apron, aching joints, a silence too loud to ignore. She didn't linger beneath the weak halo of the flickering streetlight. There were other souls depending on her tonight. Tugging her jacket tighter against the cutting wind, she started down the alley that split the diner from a boarded-up pawn shop, her footsteps steady, deliberate. But Naomi wasn't alone. Beneath the dripping awning of a shuttered laundromat, a figure lingered. Logan Reed watched from the shadows, his breath misting faintly in the cold. He hadn't come to frighten her. He wasn't even sure why he hadn't left hours ago. There was something about her, something in the way she moved with urgency but no fear, in the way her eyes carried a tired vigilance instead of suspicion, that rooted him to the spot. Tonight wasn't just about loss reports or failing revenue anymore. Something was unfolding in front of him, something raw and unvarnished, and he couldn't look away. Without knowing why, Logan pulled his hood lower and stepped into the rain, his gaze locked on the small, determined figure disappearing into the mist ahead, carrying hope inside a fraying bag. Briarwood didn't really sleep. It endured, grinding through the hours like an old machine too stubborn to die. Along the crumbling east side, where crooked power lines sagged overhead and abandoned buildings loomed like tired sentries, the rain washed the streets, but never the weariness. Here, dreams flickered as dimly as the dying neon signs buzzing half-heartedly against the dark. It was in this forgotten stretch of the city, wedged between a pawn shop with bars over its broken windows and a laundromat long since surrendered to rust, that the rusty lantern stood hunched against the night. Its sign sputtered above the doorway, the bulbs blinking in a slow, uneven rhythm as if the place itself were breathing shallowly. Behind the greasy, fogged-up glass, the world inside looked suspended, caught between yesterday's grime and today's exhaustion. The door creaked miserably when Naomi pushed through it each evening, and the single bell overhead let out a tired clang as if protesting another night's work. Inside, the air was a heavy stew of burnt coffee, old onions, and lemon cleaner that never quite conquered the grease soaked into every crack. The booths had once been cherry red, now faded to a weary brown, their seams split open like old scars. The linoleum floors were scratched raw by decades of restless feet, truckers hauling long nights, graveyard shift workers chasing paychecks, the lonely looking for a place to sit where nobody asked questions. It was a place you passed through, not somewhere you stayed, unless staying was the only option left. And every night, Naomi Brooks moved through it with the silent precision of someone who no longer needed light to see. Her skin, deep and warm against the diner's flickering glow, bore the sheen of long hours and little rest. Her hair, tugged back into a bun that frayed at the edges, was a small rebellion against collapse. The stained apron knotted too tightly around her waist seemed less like a uniform and more like a tether holding her together. She didn't waste words. She didn't waste time. Her eyes, rimmed in quiet fatigue, missed nothing, not out of suspicion, but necessity. The rusty lantern wasn't just a job. It was survival, routine, and sanctuary all stitched into one, and Naomi had learned long ago that survival didn't wait for sympathy. It waited for no one. Outside, the rain thickened, rattling against the diner's loose window panes, and somewhere deep in the night, another shift in Naomi's quiet battle to endure was about to begin. The clock behind the counter ticked past midnight, but Naomi didn't need to see it. She felt the time sinking into her bones, dragging at her limbs like invisible weights. With the last customers gone, just 2 warehouse workers and a cab driver who'd left behind 3 sticky quarters and a mountain of used napkins, Naomi moved silently through the empty diner. Her hands, rough and dry from endless scrubbing, wiped down tables in slow, practiced circles. The jukebox in the corner hadn't played music in years, but she still passed by and pressed the button to shut it off, an old habit no one else bothered with. Tonight, though, the routine felt heavier. Her mind wasn't trapped inside these 4 grease-stained walls. It was back in her crumbling apartment across town, where the heater coughed and sputtered like an old man too tired to fight the cold. Her mother, Gloria Brooks, would be curled up on the sagging couch, hiding her labored breathing behind shallow smiles. Naomi didn't need to see the empty medicine bottles lining the counter to know they were out again. And little Rosie, her baby sister, was probably tucked under a threadbare quilt in the bedroom, trying to finish homework by flashlight because the lamp had shorted out last week and there was no money to replace it. Rent was overdue. The electric company had left another warning taped to the door that morning, fluttering like a white flag of surrender. Naomi hadn't listened to the voicemail from the landlord. She already knew what it said. She didn't need reminders that the ground beneath her was crumbling. Every step she took felt like it might be the one where everything finally gave way. She finished wiping down the counter and moved behind it, reaching beneath for a plastic container and a roll of parchment paper she kept hidden. Her hands worked swiftly, almost invisibly, packing untouched scraps, half a sandwich here, a few spoonfuls of soup there, into the worn canvas bag slung behind the counter. It wasn't theft. It was survival, just not hers alone. And somewhere deep inside her, Naomi knew that if she stopped moving, if she let herself feel the full weight of it all, she might never find the strength to start again. Outside, the rain beat harder against the windows, as if urging her onward toward a night that would be unlike any she had ever known. In the farthest booth of the rusty lantern, hidden beneath a flickering light that sputtered like it couldn't decide whether to live or die, Logan Reed sat nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee. His hoodie hung low over his face, his hands tucked deep into the pockets of worn jeans, his posture unremarkable. Just another tired drifter passing through a forgotten town. No one looked twice at him, and that was exactly how he wanted it. Logan hadn't meant to stay this long. When he first walked into the rusty lantern that evening, it was supposed to be a formality. Another line on a checklist, another underperforming property circled in red on his quarterly loss report. He had come expecting to find excuses, maybe a little petty theft, the usual reasons small places bled money until they disappeared. But instead, he found Naomi. At first, he thought she was hiding something. People didn't work with that kind of relentless, almost desperate energy unless they had a secret. In his world, hard work was rarely pure. It was usually currency for something else. But as he sat there, blending into the stained shadows of the diner, Logan's certainty began to crack. There was no slyness in Naomi's movements, no quick glances over her shoulder, no hint of self-congratulation. Only quiet purpose, only the steady, measured rhythm of someone fighting a battle no one else could see. He watched as she packed the leftovers, quick and methodical, her fingers moving with the precision of someone who had done this 100 times before. She wasn't stealing out of greed. She wasn't pocketing the food for herself. Every action carried a weight heavier than hunger. It carried responsibility, a quiet urgency that tugged at something long dormant in Logan's own chest. When Naomi slung the canvas bag over her shoulder and slipped out the back door into the storm, Logan dropped a $10 bill beneath his untouched coffee cup and rose from his booth without a sound. He didn't hesitate. Without fully understanding why, he pulled his hood tighter, pushed into the rain, and followed the girl who carried more than just food in her hands. She carried a piece of a world he had long forgotten how to see. The night swallowed Naomi as she slipped between the alleys, her canvas bag pressed tight against her side, her head ducked low against the biting wind. She moved quickly, expertly, weaving through puddles that gleamed like shattered glass under the erratic glow of broken streetlights. The rain had turned colder, slicing sideways across the empty streets, needling through the threadbare denim of her jacket. But Naomi didn't slow. She couldn't. Somewhere out there 3 little bodies were waiting, and they would be hungry. Behind her, Logan kept pace, careful to stay far enough not to startle her but close enough not to lose her. His boots splashed through the shallow water, his breath coming out in quick, controlled bursts. This wasn't the kind of city you wandered in after dark unless you had no choice, and Naomi moved through it like someone who had memorized every crack, every shortcut, every dangerous blind corner by heart. She cut across a deserted parking lot where none of the floodlights worked anymore, the pavement cratered with potholes that filled with black water. Then she ducked behind a sagging dumpster, disappearing into a narrow gap between 2 buildings. Logan hesitated only a moment before following, the cold seeping into his bones, but the curiosity pulling him forward even harder. On the other side of the gap, Naomi emerged into another street, a sliver of forgotten asphalt that cut behind a shuttered grocery store and a row of boarded-up houses. Steam rose from a cracked sewer grate, curling ghost-like around her as she passed. She never once looked back. She didn't need to. In this part of Briarwood, looking back was a luxury she couldn't afford. Logan watched her from a half-block behind, his heart hammering harder than the climb warranted. He didn't understand it yet, the strange gravity pulling him forward. All he knew was that this wasn't a theft, and it wasn't a scam. It was something else entirely. And as Naomi took a sharp left down another alley, disappearing briefly into mist and rain, Logan steeled himself and followed, unaware that he was about to witness a kind of courage that boardrooms and bottom lines could never measure. As Logan followed at a cautious distance, 1,000 assumptions rattled in his mind. Maybe she was pocketing the food for herself. Maybe she was selling it. People didn't work themselves to the bone for nothing. Not in his world. Especially not for strangers. His steps were steady, but inside, everything felt uneven, uneasy. Was he here to catch her? Or to understand her? He wasn't sure anymore. Every dripping street lamp, every cracked sidewalk they passed seemed to strip away another layer of cynicism he had built over years of boardrooms and cost-benefit analyses. What if she wasn't hiding something shameful? What if she was hiding something sacred? The thought unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. He had come to find a liability he hadn't expected to find. This. Something raw. Something stubbornly good. Logan tightened his hood against the rain and kept moving, knowing deep down that whatever he discovered tonight, he wouldn't be able to unsee it, or walk away unchanged. He quickened his pace, keeping just close enough to see her silhouette slip through the mist. And then, as if guided by a path only she knew, Naomi turned down one last alley, her footsteps sure, her destination set. Naomi stopped in front of a battered gate wedged between 2 crumbling brick buildings, its iron bars bent inward as if some long-forgotten impact had left them that way. Above it, a weathered wooden sign barely clung to the wall, the letters so faded they were almost invisible. Harbor Haven Youth Shelter. The place looked abandoned from the street, like everything else around it, but Naomi didn't hesitate. She knocked 3 times, quick, deliberate, a rhythm clearly known only to those who mattered. For a long breath, nothing happened. Then, with a grating squeal, the gate creaked open just enough for 3 small figures to slip through, their faces lit faintly by the distant glow of a broken street lamp. A girl about 9, her sneakers flopping loose on 2 small feet, rushed forward first, arms thrown wide. A younger boy with bare ankles shivering in the cold followed, clutching the sleeves of his oversized hoodie. And the tiniest, a girl no older than 4, clung to the boy's hand, her scarf unraveling at the ends. Naomi crouched down, the canvas bag sliding from her shoulder, and began unpacking its precious cargo with a fluidity born of repetition. Half a sandwich, still wrapped carefully. A battered foam container of soup, still warm enough to steam faintly in the chill air. Muffins, wrapped in napkins that she pressed gently into tiny, grateful hands. She moved with the kind of tenderness that didn't draw attention to itself. No fanfare, no expectation of thanks. Only the quiet, relentless care of someone who had chosen, night after night, to show up for those who had no one else. The kids accepted the food with reverence, crouching together inside the shelter of the gate, sharing without words. Naomi ruffled the boy's tangled hair, brushed a crumb from the little girl's cheek, tied the bigger girl's shoelace without being asked. She whispered something too soft for Logan to hear, but whatever it was, it made the smallest child laugh, a sound so pure and sudden that it cut through the bleakness like sunlight through storm clouds. From his hidden spot across the street, Logan watched, motionless, the weight in his chest growing heavier with every breath. This wasn't pity he felt. It wasn't charity. It was something deeper, something painful and humbling. He stayed rooted there, even as Naomi zipped her empty bag closed, gave each child a final, lingering touch of comfort, and disappeared once more into the rain, her head high, her pace steady, carrying nothing now but an invisible, enormous grace that he could no longer pretend not to see. Logan stood there long after Naomi had vanished into the mist, the rain soaking through his hoodie, clinging coldly to his skin. But he barely noticed. His gaze remained fixed on the rusted gate of Harbor Haven, now closed again, swaying slightly with each gust of wind. He had come to Briarwood armed with numbers, loss margins, overhead costs, bottom lines. He had prepared himself to close another failed property, to sweep it into the dustbin of corporate mistakes and move on without a backward glance. It was efficient, it was clean, it was necessary, or so he had believed. But standing there now, with the image of Naomi's thin, steady hands pressing muffins into the small, grateful palms of children who had nothing else, Logan felt something break loose inside him. A pressure he hadn't realized was building, a shame he hadn't known he could still feel. This wasn't theft. This wasn't a liability on a spreadsheet. This was sacrifice, woven quietly into the nights when no one was watching. Naomi wasn't saving herself. She was saving others, small lives who depended on her in ways the world would never notice or reward. The realization hit harder than he was ready for. All those late-night meetings, those polished presentations, the endless calculations of risk and reward, none of it had ever accounted for someone like her, someone who gave away what little they had without asking anything in return, someone whose heroism was invisible by design. Logan tightened his fists in his pockets, grounding himself against the storm inside his chest. He couldn't erase what he had seen. He didn't want to. Somehow, he knew, the choice he made next would matter in ways no quarterly report ever could. And even as the rain battered the streets harder and the city groaned beneath the weight of another sleepless night, Logan Reed turned and began walking, not away from what he had witnessed, but deeper into it, toward a truth that demanded to be answered. The following night, the rusty lantern pulsed with the low murmur of tired conversations and the muted clatter of cutlery against chipped plates. Truckers leaned over steaming mugs of coffee, nurses in rumpled scrubs shared weary laughter in the corner, and a man at the counter nursed a bowl of chili like it was the only warmth he had found all day. It was the kind of life that flickered in the cracks of a city too bruised to shine outright, but too stubborn to go dark completely. And threading through it all, moving swiftly and steadily as always, was Naomi Brooks. Her apron was the same, stained and too tight. Her sneakers, worn to almost nothing, slapped softly against the dull linoleum. She balanced a tray with practiced ease, dodged a half-sleeping man blocking the aisle, caught a glass teetering on the edge of a table without breaking stride. To the casual eye, she was just another waitress hustling to close out a late shift. But Logan, seated again in the far booth beneath the sputtering light, saw what others didn't. He saw the subtle way she watched the clock without ever fully turning her head. He saw how her fingers twitched near the end of her shift, like they were counting down seconds without her permission. She was holding herself together by force of will alone, stitched up by purpose and exhaustion, and still she moved as if invisibility were her armor. No one thanked her. No one noticed the way she kept the chaos from tipping into disaster. And Naomi never asked for more. She never paused long enough for the ache to catch her. She simply endured, because endurance was what survival demanded. Logan didn't touch his coffee. He barely breathed. He watched her the way a man watches a miracle he doesn't want to scare away. This wasn't a show. It wasn't charity for an audience. Naomi didn't know she was being seen, and somehow that made what she did even more staggering. When the last plate was cleared, the last trucker stumbled out into the cold, and the last laugh faded into the tired hum of the night, Naomi moved into her closing routine with the same quiet determination. And this time, Logan rose before she could leave, stepping out into the rain-soaked streets ahead of her, determined to meet the truth not as a stranger lurking in shadows, but as a man ready to witness it in full daylight. Logan waited across the street from Harbor Haven, the cold settling into his bones despite the heavy coat he wore this time. The gate looked even more battered by the rain tonight, the crooked sign above it swinging slightly with every gust of wind. He kept to the shadows, his breath curling into the night, his heart beating faster than it should have as he watched for her. And when Naomi appeared, cutting through the mist with her canvas bag slung over her shoulder, he felt that same pull. Quiet, insistent, undeniable. She knocked 3 times, soft but certain, and the gate creaked open once more. The 3 small figures emerged quickly, their faces brightening the moment they saw her. Tonight, Logan noticed the small changes. The girl's scarf had been tied carefully, her shoes double-knotted to stay in place. The boy wore mismatched socks, but they were clean, and the littlest one clutched Naomi's hand so tightly it was like she was anchoring herself to something real in a world that so often wasn't. Naomi knelt and unpacked the food, distributing each item with the same tenderness, the same quiet ritual. The children huddled near her, eating quickly but reverently, as if aware this moment was both precious and fragile. Logan stepped forward from the shadows without thinking, his footsteps soft against the wet pavement. He approached the gate, careful not to alarm them. The boy, maybe 6 or 7, noticed first. His eyes, wide and wary, locked onto Logan as he approached. "Who are you?" the boy asked, his voice thin but brave, his small frame straightening defensively. Logan crouched a few feet away, lowering his voice. "Just a friend," he said. "I saw the girl who brings you food." The boy glanced back toward Naomi, then back at Logan. "Her name's Naomi," he said, the syllables soft but proud. "She's real nice." Logan smiled gently, feeling something loosen in his chest. "What's your name?" "Benji," the boy answered, clutching his sandwich tighter. Logan nodded. "Benji," he repeated, like an oath. And in that small exchange, something shifted again, deeper, unshakable. As Logan realized he wasn't just witnessing kindness, he was being invited into it, one whispered name at a time. The next morning, Logan sat behind his expansive desk, staring out across a city that looked deceptively clean, and ordered from 40 stories up. Down there, the cracks in the sidewalks were invisible, the broken windows hidden by distance, the hunger muffled beneath the hum of traffic. From up here, Briarwood was just another ledger entry, another struggling market to be evaluated, bought, or abandoned. But Logan couldn't unsee what he had witnessed in the cold and rain. The girl with the frayed jacket and the iron resolve, the children clutching crumbs like treasure, the gate that guarded more than just brick and mortar. He buzzed his assistant without looking away from the window. "Elise," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "I need everything you can find on Naomi Brooks. Employee files, payroll records, address, family, Anything we have." There was a slight pause, the kind that came when an assistant debated asking why, then thought better of it. "Yes, sir," Elise replied crisply. 3 hours later, a slim manila folder landed on his desk, thinner than Logan expected. He opened it slowly, feeling like he was peeling back the layers of a secret he already half knew. Naomi's intake form listed her as a server hired 3 years prior. No disciplinary actions, no complaints filed, and an almost unbroken string of covered shifts. No sick days, no tardiness, no raises requested. Attached were a few notes. 1-bedroom rental on West Briar Street, consistently overdue on utilities. A mother, Gloria Brooks, battling a chronic heart condition without insurance. A younger sister, Rosie Brooks, 14 years old, enrolled at a public school. Decent grades despite chronic absences. And tucked at the bottom, almost as an afterthought, a notation from a former neighbor who confirmed that Naomi had been seen, night after night, delivering food to Harbor Haven Youth Shelter. No payment, no recognition, just a routine of silent sacrifice, unnoticed by almost everyone, except now by him. Logan closed the folder gently, his hands lingering on the worn cover as if it were something sacred. Somewhere deep inside, something resolute clicked into place. He pushed back from his desk and stood, knowing with absolute certainty that after tonight, nothing would be the same again. That night, the rusty lantern buzzed in its familiar, exhausted rhythm. Plates clattered in the kitchen, the old coffee machine gurgled stubbornly behind the counter, and the low hum of weary conversation drifted between booths. Life here moved the way it always had, tired but determined, stitched together by habit and necessity. Naomi, apron knotted too tight around her waist, moved with her usual grace under pressure, balancing trays, refilling mugs, wiping spills before they could spread into chaos. Her eyes stayed sharp, her steps quick, her exhaustion buried beneath layers of routine. She didn't see him at first. Logan Reed didn't sit hidden in the booth tonight. He didn't wear a hoodie to blend into the shadows. He stood in the center of the diner, dressed sharply in a dark coat and slacks, radiating a stillness so out of place in this worn-down place that it made the very air around him seem to hold its breath. Naomi spotted him when she turned from the coffee machine, a tray balanced precariously in her hands. She froze mid-step, the tray tilting, a few fries skidding dangerously close to the edge. Her heart lurched violently, not with recognition, but with instinct. The instinct of someone who knows when something bigger than them is about to crash down. "Miss Brooks," Logan said, his voice calm but carrying through the diner like a clear bell. The tray clattered onto the counter, the noise sharp and jarring in the stunned silence that followed. Naomi set the tray down slowly, her hands trembling despite herself. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I know I shouldn't have taken the food. It was leftovers. I swear, I never—" "Stop," Logan said gently, but firmly enough to leave no room for fear. "I know about Harbor Haven. I know about your mother, your sister. I know about all the nights you gave away your own meals without asking for anything in return." The diner had gone utterly still. Even Max, the cook, leaned halfway out the kitchen window, a dish rag dangling from his shoulder. Customers paused mid-bite. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every eye turned toward Naomi, who stood rooted to the floor, pale and wide-eyed, every muscle ready to shatter under the weight of shame she hadn't earned. "You're not in trouble," Logan continued. "Quite the opposite." He turned, addressing not just her but the entire room. "As of tonight, Naomi Brooks is the new manager of the Rusty Lantern," he announced, effective immediately. "Her pay is tripled, her mother's medical expenses are fully covered, and her sister's school tuition is paid in full." For a moment there was nothing, just a stunned, breathless silence, thick with disbelief. And then, slowly, something deeper began to shift, unseen but unstoppable, like the first crack of light after a long and brutal winter. Naomi barely remembered how she made it through the rest of that night. Applause hadn't broken out, not the loud, boisterous kind reserved for grand moments, but there was a slow, almost reverent murmur, a shifting of shoulders, a softening of eyes. Even the regulars who had grumbled at cold coffee or slow service sat a little straighter, watching her not with judgment, but with a kind of reluctant respect. Naomi moved through the last tasks like she was floating outside her own body, her hands steady even as her mind reeled. Somehow, the walls of the rusty lantern felt a little less heavy, a little less like they were pressing down on her with every breath. When she finally left, the night was cold but clear, the rain having washed the streets clean for once. In her pocket was her first paycheck as a manager, more money than she had ever held at once. It wasn't just a paycheck, it was a shield against the eviction notices, against the nights of empty cabinets and unpaid bills. It was groceries bought without counting every coin, electricity kept on without bargaining over grace periods, medicine ordered before the last pill was gone. It was hope in a worn envelope. The next afternoon, Naomi walked through Briarwood with 2 sturdy paper sacks in her hands. No more worn canvas bag filled with scraps. No more sneaking through alleys clutching leftovers like contraband. Inside, the bags were foil-wrapped turkey sandwiches, cartons of orange juice, shiny red apples, and soft peanut butter cookies tucked carefully between them. Food chosen, bought, given, not begged, not stolen, not salvaged. Real food, given with dignity. At Harbor Haven, the gate squeaked as it always did, and the kids came running before she even knocked. Benji's sneakers, though still too big, looked newer. The little girl's scarf had been freshly tied. They tackled her with the kind of joy that asked for nothing but presence, clinging to her legs, reaching for the brown sacks with wide, hungry eyes. Naomi laughed, a sound rich and full and almost unrecognizable after so many months of survival, and she handed them the first real meal they had seen in days. The light in their faces was thanks enough. But somewhere behind her, unseen for now, someone else was watching too, and the story that had begun in rain and shadows was far from over. Naomi knelt down to help the kids unwrap their sandwiches, brushing crumbs from their cheeks, smoothing down wild hair with the tenderness of someone who had never forgotten what it meant to be small and scared and hungry. Benji tore into his sandwich with a grin that could have lit the whole block, and the littlest girl, mouthful of peanut butter and happiness, pressed her sticky hands into Naomi's lap without hesitation or apology. Naomi laughed again, a sound that startled even herself, and, for a moment, the world beyond Harbor Haven, the bills, the shifts, the aches that never quite went away, disappeared. She didn't notice the approaching footsteps at first, muffled as they were by the cracked pavement and soft wind. But when she looked up, Logan Reed was standing just beyond the gate, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, his coat dusted with the misty rain. In his hands, he held a mesh sack crammed full of things: soccer balls, coloring books, packs of socks, and flashlights. Simple things, but things that mattered. He offered it without ceremony, his voice low and almost shy. "Figured you could use a few extras," he said. Naomi blinked, caught completely off guard. She rose slowly, brushing her hands on her jeans, her heart stuttering in her chest. For a long moment she could only stare, the enormity of what he was offering, of what he had already given, sinking in through layers of stubborn pride and old hurt. "Thank you," she managed, her voice cracking slightly despite herself. "For everything." Logan shook his head, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Don't thank me," he said gently. "Call me Logan. And honestly, thank you. You reminded me what actually matters." They stood there together, the rain misting between them, watching as the kids devoured their meals and kicked a soccer ball across the broken concrete with pure, unfiltered joy. The cracks in the sidewalk didn't matter. The peeling paint and rattling windows didn't matter. What mattered was the sound, the laughter, loud and fierce and unbroken, that rose into the gray sky like a hymn. Naomi tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear, her heart full to the brim, and in that quiet, golden moment, she understood. Sometimes you didn't need to fix the whole world. Sometimes it was enough to light up just one corner of it so brightly that even the darkness had to take a step back. Across the city, life went on as it always did. Traffic jammed, lights blinked out, sirens wailed into the dusk. But on that cracked little street outside Harbor Haven, something else bloomed quietly, stubbornly against the gray. Naomi stood with Logan beside her, their arms lightly brushing, watching the children laugh with their mouths full and their futures, for once, a little less uncertain. She wasn't rich, she wasn't famous. She still had rent to pay and nights when fear clawed at the edges of her resolve. But she wasn't invisible anymore. She was a light, imperfect but enduring, in a world too often eager to look away. And Logan, once a man who measured everything in profits and risks, now measured moments like this, the ones that didn't fit into charts or spreadsheets but filled the soul anyway. And somehow, against all odds, both of them knew this was only the beginning. Not all heroes wear badges. Some wear aprons stained by long shifts and sneakers worn thin by endless miles of sacrifice. Naomi Brooks didn't wait for the world to recognize her. She simply chose every single day to fight for corners no one else would notice. She reminded us that real strength isn't loud or glamorous. It's the quiet resilience to keep showing up, especially when no one's watching. It's the choice to be the light in places the world forgets. And Logan Reed? He learned that true value isn't counted in profits or losses, but in the human hearts you choose to lift up along the way. So when life tempts you to judge too quickly, remember Naomi, the girl who turned leftovers into lifelines, who carried hope in a battered bag, who changed lives not by shouting, but by simply caring. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Together, we can light up more corners of the world.